everybody, and welcome today to this amazing webinar, to our 150th webinar, where we create awareness, connections, learn, inspire, and reimagine a regenerative world for all of us. I'm Laura Jaduru-Koch, founder of Women for Solutions, a global network of thousands of women and men entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs in over 40 countries that share simple and effective solutions towards a more caring economy. The tools that you will choose and implement are really fabulous because they help with what we do is the growth and consciousness of people to become better. Today, you will hear a truly inspiring topic, enduring academic gains through neuroscience, one of the most effective simple methods and solutions to bring the results in a few months. Let me share my experience. I'm dyslexic, struggling all my life about it. But 10 years ago, I was trying to find something for my son who's dyslexic, and I found Gemm Learning, a miracle. It works. I'll tell you the example in my personal example as a grown-up when I use this method. I was playing the piano to actually improve my mind and and I stopped for 5 months just to do the Gemm training. And when I reconnected with my piano teacher a few months after 5 months, she said, "Wow, you've been practicing a lot. Your left hand is working miracles." And I had not touched the piano in 5 months. So basically, this method works. Today's speakers are Delphine Marden and Anne Cooley-Nixon. But before we start, I want to share with you what we always share, that is the empowering move of Women for Solution. That is, I want you to all stand up, put your shoulders back, your head up, your chin up, your eyes that are full of joy and determination to change this world. And with this amazing smile all day long, because that's a key. I will introduce you to Delphine Marden. Her background is education, teaching, internship, and students experience on middle school level, certified secondary teacher in Connecticut, Bachelor of Art in History, and a minor emphasis in creative writing and German language at the University of Redland. She is really amazing and passionate about it. And Anne Cool-Nixon is co-founder with her husband of Gemm Learning, a certified accountant with Price Waterhouse, and now full-time dedicated to Gemm Learning. Basically, an accountant realized that she can change the world by doing Gemm Learning. Anne.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Laura, for inviting us to be here with you today. We're grateful to be able to speak to so many entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs around the world, and commend Laura for her advocacy on the caring economy. Such important work. I am Anne Cool-Nixon, and I'll share a brief history of Gemm Learning with you, and then turn the program over to Delphine Marden, who is our Director of Education. And really has a bird's eye view into the lives of our families before, during, and after their work with Gemm. Our business, I'm sure like many of yours, came about because we saw a need. And it was a need for remediation to provide lasting help, not just Band-Aids for struggling learners like our son. Our oldest child began exhibiting some language delays at an early age. These did not go away as we had hoped, and developed into focus and reading issues around the age of 7. The diagnosis was auditory processing disorder. And this is a term we really didn't understand at first. Our son could hear through his ears, but his brain was not understanding or processing beyond that. So the English language for him was muddied. It just was not clear. We tried the usual remedies, which were slow, costly, and really didn't yield noticeable results. Now, along that journey, a speech and language pathologist from New York City recommended a program called Fast ForWord. And after a few short months of slower and then gradually increasing language speed exercises, we noticed a substantial change in our son's vocabulary and ability to follow directions and even multitask. Now, at the time, Fast ForWord was only available through school districts and through licensed language specialists. So my husband approached the developer of the software with the idea of making it available to families across the US and Canada, families just like ours, whose children were really struggling in school. So Gemm Learning was born in 2006, and to date, we've worked with over 5,000 families, and we're the largest provider of Fast ForWord in North America. Now, today, our firm has 8 employees, and aside from my husband, these are all women who have advanced degrees in education or who have had children benefit from Fast ForWord. So everyone in our company is empathetic with parents who come to us with. So Delhi, take it away.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Laura, for having us. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Delphine Marden. I'm the Director of Education at Gemm Learning. I've been with Gemm for about 13 years. It's for me, I came to Gemm to do observations of students when I was working on my grad school, my master's degree. And I really pretty quickly fell in love with Gemm and with the software because I was diagnosed with dyslexia and auditory processing disorder about 1990 when I was in 3rd grade. And so for me, I very quickly saw a little bit or a lot of me in the students that I was observing and then started working with and really starting to see, you know, how much faster they were able to improve than I had been without having access to this kind of software, you know, way back then. And so it became very personal very quickly for me. And so that's why, you know, 13 years on, I'm still here and very eager and excited and happy to work with our students and help families, you know, navigate implementing this program into their daily lives. And so I'm going to spend, you know, a bunch of my time, you know, just kind of explaining what we do at Gemm and who we help. So I'm going to share this. So what makes Fast ForWord and Gemm Learning to me so personal and exciting is because we see these, you know, academic gains that are like long-lasting, lifelong lasting, but it's all rooted in neuroscience. Now, oh, hold on. So as I had said, you know, struggling with auditory processing disorder and dyslexia, I knew how hard it was to learn how to read because it just felt impossible. And as an adult, I learned that what skills are needed in order to become a proficient reader. You know, the root cognitive skills of our memory, our attention, our processing and sequencing, and then into our root language skills of phonological and phonemic awareness, our decoding skills, our vocabulary and comprehension. For so many students, you know, young and old who are struggling with reading, often that difficulty is rooted in a challenged area in one or many of these skills. And about 40 or so years ago, there were really big developments in neuroscience and this really further understanding of brain plasticity and neuroplasticity. And about 30 or so years ago, these 4 scientists, Dr. Mesernick, Dr. Jenkins, Dr. Talal, and Dr. Miller, they teamed up together because they were all neuroscientists and had really been following these developments in brain plasticity research, as well as all of the developments in access to personal computers. Personal computers were just becoming more and more available. And so they combined these things to create the Fast ForWord software. Now, I get asked a lot by families and by students, what is brain plasticity? And brain plasticity is really, it's that our brain is malleable. It is not fixed, that it's able to continuously create new neural pathways. And an easy example or a more common example that people don't realize they know of is when people have had traumatic brain injuries, whether it's a stroke or an accident, sometimes that traumatic brain injury leads to like scar tissue in an area of the brain that may not work. But because of neuroplasticity, the brain is able to rewire around those areas and create new neural pathways so that people can regain skills that may have been lost. Another example that some people know of is when people have lost their vision. And so the auditory part of their brain starts taking over that visual cortex, almost to create like supersonic hearing. It's because they're not able to see anymore. They have more brain space used for hearing. So those are more common examples of, or better known examples of brain plasticity. But here's another example of neuroplasticity and brain plasticity. So these are images from a functional MRI. And the first image on the left is what the brain looks of a proficient reader. And you can see all the activated areas in the brain. And then the middle image is the image of a struggling reader. So you can see that there's not as much activity happening in the brain. The final picture is what the brain looks like through a functional MRI after a struggling reader has used Fast ForWord. And you can see so much of that activation in the brain, that illuminated activity happening now in the brain because of Fast ForWord. And it's just really exciting to see that. And that it can also help, non-struggling readers because there's more of the brain activated.
Yeah, and here, Delia, I can add that when I finished the program, I saw exactly that. I belonged and organized for more than 30 years a book club because I love to read. However, when I finished the program, I was able to share a lot more from the monthly readings after. So it was miraculous to me as well.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. I actually, when I did the program, I was in graduate school, just, wanted to have a go at it. And one of the things that I noticed with myself is there were just times where you had to read very, very boring material, that it wasn't necessarily written, certain topics may not have been written with excitement, and so it was harder and took longer. It was far more exhausting to read through things that, weren't written in an exciting, passionate way. And what I found when I was doing Fast ForWord is that some of the, things that I'd have to, work through during my master's coursework, I was able to just keep going a little bit longer, and wouldn't get fatigued, wouldn't have to go back as far to reread where I had all of a sudden just gotten exhausted from boredom, and so it's really exciting how it can just keep you going, and really keep you engaged. So I'm gonna So one of the things that challenged and struggling readers often have to do repeatedly is they're constantly practicing decoding, and they practice reading and practice decoding. For younger students, they often go and utilize the resource room at their school if they leave the home for school. For so many people, the student, the parents, the teachers, frustration grows. Often we see constant and a lot of extra tutoring happening. It's expensive. It takes a lot of time. And all of these things are great when people need just a little extra practice. But what we find is when practice doesn't yield the results that practice is supposed to, we want to start looking at it in a different way. And that's where Gemm comes in. And that's where Gemm Learning and the Fast ForWord really can help start getting to the root of why practice hasn't yielded the results that practice is supposed to. Now, one of the things I'm sharing right now is a picture of what one of the exercises in Fast ForWord looks like. So this specific exercise is called Moon Ranch, and it's in the younger student initial cognitive program called Foundations 1. There are technically 21 different root cognitive exercises in Fast ForWord, divided between 4 different sets of programs for different, with really the target audience being different ages and grades, but it's used for all ages. And this exercise, Moon Ranch, it is working on phonological awareness, processing speed, and sustained focus. But all of the exercises in Fast ForWord have a gamification aspect to it. So it's, it's meant to be user-friendly and inviting to students. So with this exercise, a student will listen to a sound being repeated over and over again, a phoneme, a sound within speech. And when they hear that sound change, it will, they have to click on the chicken. It sometimes might be a pig or a horse, but they have to click on the animal and then to let the software and the computer know that you heard the change and you were able to respond to hearing that difference quickly. All of the exercises build in difficulty, whether the speed of speech gets faster or the response time speeds up. And one of the things that about all of the exercises, because they're computer game styled, it has a secret little other objective for students to keep them engaged. So with this exercise, the student has to get the chicken over the 3 pillars and then over the fence to the field in the background. Just to kind of help keep students engaged. And it's not just Moon Ranch, all of the exercises have that game aspect, because for the program to work, we need to be, students really need to be willing to play and be playing consistently. Now, one of the things that, besides having worked with students and seeing myself in so many of our students that I've worked with over the years, the Fast ForWord program has more patents in neuroscience and education than any other reading intervention program that we know of. It has more research proving its efficacy than any other reading intervention program that we know of. It's been meticulously peer-reviewed and has 30+ years of neuroscience research backing it. And those are really important things, to when thinking about how can I help myself or how can I help my child become a better reader, more proficient reader and learner. But one of the things that I think is really important is, and what creates these enduring gains, is that all of these exercises, they target what's almost always the root cause, that core foundational skill, those areas that, are struggling to strengthen from, just your regular reading practice. What I find so exciting is that on average, students will see up to 2 years of academic growth in about 6 months working on the program consistently, 5 days each week, and that's just huge. For so many students, as they continue to go into higher grade levels, that gap between where they're at and their current grade level gets bigger, and that just makes everything harder. Some of the more important things that I see on a day-to-day with our students, as well as hearing from our families and from our adult students that we work with, are the behavioral changes. And I'm not talking about, good behavior or bad behavior. I'm talking about, the amount of times that I hear that a student has become more confident in the classroom, that they are seeing, improvements in that phonics and decoding. When a parent tells me that, before we were lucky if their child got 2 of the 10 spelling words right on the weekly spelling test, and now it's 8, 9, or always getting perfect scores on the spelling test, and when students start seeing their hard work reflected in better grades and more ease and less time needed to complete tasks, they start to feel better. Homework becomes less of a fight for families, and that's really important. The ability to remember you know, what they were talking about in class, to apply it to the homework, it becomes stronger. And those are such huge and important behavioral and observational changes and steps forward. My most favorite changes, though, that I hear from people are when families tell us that their child's social life has improved. And, you know, and I'm not talking about, you know, going to high school parties. I'm talking about making friends, you know, being able to keep up with their peers, you know, being able to follow along in conversation, being able to take risks, you know, and a huge risk that struggling readers don't take is, you know, offering to read out loud in the classroom, you know, and being willing to try that it's a huge, unbelievably important step, is seeing that confidence.
Deli, if I could just add.
Yeah, please.
It is true that most parents come to us hoping to see academic gains for their children. Let's face it, I mean, going to school is our kids' full-time job. But there are a lot of other advantages to being able to process efficiently. And these are important too. And one of my most vivid memories is on the soccer field. You know, early on, our son seemed lost, and following directions was very difficult for him. But as he started to make more sense out of the world, he could understand what the coaches wanted from him. He could play his position. He could take cues from his teammates. And all of a sudden, Saturday afternoons were a lot happier for him.
That's beautiful. We hear these types of stories from so many of our families that we work with, even from the adults that are doing the program. They share with us that, you know, they are more willing to partake in different things at work. You know, they're not hesitating as much as they used to. They feel more confident completing things and, you know, taking on different projects, which is just so, it's empowering. So I do often get asked, you know, who do we help? And I often will say, you know, 5 to 105. Anybody who, you know, this program is appropriate for really anybody who wants to have self-improvement. You don't need a diagnosis. Now, while we do work with a lot of folks who have had auditory processing disorder diagnosis and dyslexia diagnosis, ADHD, traumatic brain injuries, students on the autism spectrum. We even work with, you know, several English language learners as well. But a lot of our students, young and old, come to us never having a diagnosis, but just thinking, you know, I feel like I've worked so much harder to do something that seems pretty simplistic to other people. And they are able to really improve those skills, not having to work 10 times harder than everybody else just to get through that book, you know, from a book club, or, you know, through that project that your boss gave you. So the Fast ForWord program is really actually something that just about anybody can use and receive benefits from when using, you know, consistently. Now, there are a few students I'd like to share with you, just to highlight the types of things that we've seen specifically. So we had a student named Caroline, and when she started working with us, she was 12 years old in 6th grade, 7th grade. And when she came to us, she had a severe dyslexia diagnosis, ADHD, and she was reading on a 2nd to 3rd grade level. And the school had told her parents, this is as good as it's going to get for her, that there was nothing they could do to get Caroline reading any higher than where she was at. And luckily, her mom did not believe that. And her mom enrolled Caroline to work with us. She signed her up to work with us for 9 months. And in those 9 months, Caroline got to reading at grade level. So she went from a 2nd, 3rd grade level to a 6th, 7th grade level in 9 months. So really wonderful exponential growth, but it wasn't just reading. Her math improved, but, you know, her mom's said the most important thing is, you know, aside from being able to read proficiently, is that Caroline's confidence just was through the roof. She was excited. She was proud of herself. She felt she was excited to go to school every day. And we can all wish that for our child. Another student that we worked with recently was a student named CJ, who never had academic difficulties until he was in a severe car accident that left him in a coma for 30 days with a very traumatic brain injury that people didn't, the doctors didn't necessarily think he would fully recover ever. He lost so many skills from that brain injury, and he had to, relearn how to walk, relearn how to, do basic body movements. And once he had regained those skills, they realized he was really only reading at a 3rd grade level, and he had been in 11th grade. And so after only 4 months of working with us, not only did CJ feel better, he felt more confident, and everybody could tell that his reading had improved, but he had to pass the Virginia standardized test, the 11th grade test that is used in Virginia, and he passed it. And so he was able to go on to 12th grade and graduate. And that was just in 4 months, going from a 3rd grade level up to being able to pass the 11th grade, Virginia standardized learning assessments. And that it's hard to, forget that it's not magic. It's just, neuroscience and, consistent usage that really creates these kinds of miracles. The last student that I want to highlight is an adult student named Sandy, and she came to Gemm when she was 75 years old. She was dyslexic. She couldn't read really much above a 4th grade reading level. She considered herself a non-reader, despite having had her own business and having a pretty successful, good adult life. But after she had, retired, she just was getting frustrated and sick and tired of always needing to lean on somebody else to help her navigate things, and just felt like always practicing wasn't helping. After 6 months of working with Gemm, Sandy called us, and I still remember this call. It's one of those calls that I, live for. She told us she had gotten her first library card, that she went from being a non-reader to loving reading so much that she finally got her very first library card at the age of 75. And that, when she stopped working with Gemm, she was continuously reading every night to her husband for pleasure. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful thing. She loves reading. And, this was somebody at 75 who hated reading and became an avid reader. Now, these are the 3 students that I just spoke about are just a few of the students that we work with. We do have so much information on our website, not just the research, but lots of case studies and testimonials of so many students that we've worked with. On our website, gemmlearning.com, you can also request access to a demo to look at the exercises specifically. But I also know that some people are a lot more interested in research. This is just a snapshot of the research on our website. There's over 250 studies proving the efficacy of the Fast ForWord program. And this is just a little snapshot of some of the different research and the publications that they were in. And then for the folks who are curious about what's actually happening in the brain, these are some of the recommended books that are available that really kind of break down neuroplasticity, how the brain changes, what's happening in the brain. And we have these and other recommendations on our website for those who are interested. And yeah, so that's Gemm Learning and Fast ForWord.
Thank you very much. This was fascinating, and I was very impressed because I felt everything you said about the examples. When before Gemm Learner, I didn't know that I could not really hear the S's of words, and that was very interesting because there were exercises on that. But mostly is that Gemm Learning is really sharing changes and consciousness on the caring economy pillar number 3. and you do both, basing pillar number 3 for women for the caring economy is to improve and visibilize the importance of childhood education, and also reskilling of adults to gain confidence, to become more conscious, to become better people, because the happier you can get a student to be confident, the better for the student. And on that note, we are open to the floor for questions. And
I wanted to piggyback off of what you just said, Laura. You know, with the third pillar being education and reskilling, what we see so often with Fast ForWord, whether you're a child or an adult using it, is that I can't and it's hard are no longer synonyms. They no longer mean the same thing. And so as people strengthen and rewire their brain and strengthen their neuroplasticity, when things are hard, it's no longer I can't, or it's no longer impossible. It's okay, it's hard, but I can. And it's just so important.
And so my first question before we open to the audience is, what is the difference between phonetic awareness and phonological awareness? And this question is asked a lot by everybody.
Yeah, that's something that a lot of people ask me about, because me and my team oversee working with our students, working with our families on a day-to-day basis. And the way I've always understood the difference between phonological and phonemic awareness is phonological awareness is receptive. It's coming in and being able to distinguish between those similar sounding phonemes. And hearing that subtle difference and processing that subtle difference. But phonemic is the expressive, is being able to manipulate it and use it and get it out. So one is coming in, the other one is coming out.
Your experience, then, how long does it take to see real results after using the program, and how often do the children use it, or the grown-ups?
So normally within 4 to 6 months, families are able to start seeing observational changes, you know, whether it's those spelling tests are getting better, or homework there's just not a fight. It may not take as less time, but it's not World War III every night trying to convince your kid just to sit down and do their homework. We see a lot of people will tell us, you know, I read the paper every morning, and it used to take me 45 minutes to get through a section. I've been doing it in 25 now, you know, and I remember I'm able to talk about what's happened in the news at work, you know. So normally within about 4 to 6 months, there are observational changes that people are seeing within themselves, or coaches, teachers, parents are seeing within the child.
Fantastic. That's great. And then, but can you go further and explain what is the difficulty to identify audio processing disorders in children and adults?
So that's a great question. So auditory processing disorder, I often explain that it's very invisible, because we can hear, and we would know if somebody couldn't hear, didn't have the physical ability to hear, but we can't see inside that our brain is doing something different with that auditory information than how somebody else's brain is doing it. I often kind of explain it that it almost seems like when you're listening, it's like all the information is taking the really long scenic way to get to the place to be really understood and comprehended, as opposed to just going straight there, you know, like the direct route versus connecting flights is kind of how it makes sense in my mind, based off of my experience. I know for a lot of folks with auditory processing, they can hear, but it sounds like half the conversation is underwater. And that makes it really hard. So you're picking up bits and pieces, and then you're trying to put it together. So I think it's the hardest thing with auditory processing disorder is that it's still not really well known, by people in general. And that it's really hard to spot. You know, it's not something that's as obvious as struggling with reading.
That's very interesting, because I guess I had that problem. And So you mentioned that this program actually works for kids from 5 to 105. I think you told me this.
Yeah.
Can you be specific as how many are children in your program versus adults? And do you see an increase in use for adults? Because the reason why I learned about your program, I read it in a book,
Okay.
and immediately I went for it.
Yeah. So I know that I feel that we have been seeing more and more adults finding us and enrolling to work with us. And I'm sure some of that is because people have told me that with the pandemic and Zoom and realizing that they're just having a harder time with certain things, and or that they find they don't have to spend 2 hours commuting. They have a little bit more time, and so they can now kind of maybe commit to bettering themselves. So I do see that, and from our current group of adults, that's what a number of them have shared with us. But it's still primarily, I think our biggest population still is definitely grade school students, elementary and middle school, and with still a significant number of high school students. But then we do, especially in the summertime, get a good amount of college students, whether it's because they are struggling with the academic work, or people who've just recently graduated and are now preparing for, whether it's the LSATs or the MCATs or all of the, furthering your education type tests. So yeah, so it really is just a wide range of folks.
That's fascinating, because one of the things that happened to me when I was in doing a master in law, after I had finished becoming a lawyer in Argentina with a lot of effort, and then doing the master in law was so hard because it was from Spanish to English. It was extremely hard. So I went to the disability center of the university, and they did some 3-day tests, and they said, "Oh, I'm sorry, your level of understanding or whatever is a 7th grader." And they said, "Well, we can record the books," and that was it. And when I did the test through you, you also said I was at 7th grade. So basically, I had not changed in 30 years my supposedly intellectual level, even though I had done so much. So it doesn't make sense. But how do you test kids? And then after that, my test score went up and up, and I'm sure that if I do it again, it will have improved. So
yeah, that's another question that happens. There is an assessment called the Reading Progress Indicator, that I'd say 3/4 of our user students will take. And the reason why it's not all of them is that some kids are overassessed and they already know where their kids are at. They're not interested in it. Some adults don't need a number to qualify their feelings that they can improve. So a lot of the times when people opt out of an assessment, the Reading Progress Indicator, it's for personal reasons, which are fine. But the Reading Progress Indicator was normed against 23 other standardized tests. And what it's doing is it's assessing students at grade level. It's not deciding what grade level they're at, but really essentially with what ease or difficulty they are completing their current grade level material, in phonological awareness, decoding, vocabulary, and comprehension. So the different grade levels have a different number of questions that are in each assessment. Adults we tell the system that it's an adult user as well. So for people who have graduated or are out of school, it has features where we can let them know this person is done with high school for the assessment, but that's how they use it. And then depending on the student, they will take periodic follow-up assessments to start seeing and measuring the numerical growth in those 4 areas.
That's fascinating, because really what I think about Gemm Learning for adults is that actually it helps them in their older age to keep their brain. I think Anne said that if you whatever you don't use, you lose in your brain plasticity.
Mm-hmm.
So do this 3 months or 4 months or maybe a month, a year, after 50, 60, I don't know what age, you can really keep your brain intact in
sharp
connection or sharpness.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I don't know if there's anybody else who has any other question. Marisa, that is in the education world, maybe you have a question. Margaret and Linda, please go ahead and unmute yourself. And Marisa, you can't. Oh, she can't. Whatever. She can't get unmuted. Let me see if I can do it. Nope, I can't unmute too. Anyway, so any other comments, closing comments? Oh yeah, you have a question.
Now it is.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Hi, and actually, thank you very much for the presentation. It was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Thank you, Deli. I don't know you. I do know Anne. I did some work for Gemm years and years ago. Well, not years and years. I think it's not even that many years ago. Time flies. With social emotional learning, I did a webinar for all of you, for you all. But what I'm actually really curious about from this presentation, which, you know, I love, and the whole subject of neuroplasticity is part of social emotional learning as well. But I'm curious, I'm quite curious about language differentiation and bilingualism or trilingualism. And the way that this operates, right? Because we know that people who speak different languages, the brains are highly developed in other ways, right? And so I'm really quite interested in the issue of bilingual or trilingualism in the program. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And the other thing I'd love to hear, because I saw that you obviously do you know, animations and you use programs, but I'd like to find out what your thoughts are about artificial intelligence and how you are using automated programs or intelligent systems, because that's also a piece of this. And then the third question, if we have time, is you know, as adults are beginning to shift and learn another language, which are coding languages and languages in computers, right? Those aren't not necessarily, they really are foreign languages to a certain degree.
Yeah.
How this program can help or be encouraged to get adults to join on, because if they haven't been using it, right, and there have been parts of their minds that have not been stimulated, how they can use this to support that ability as we move into a future of unknowns where we need to be as agile as possible. So those would be my three questions.
Okay, I think I'm going to try to get all of them. Now, one of the things, thank you for those questions. So the program is essentially, it's targeting our language processing and strengthening language processing. Now, I believe it was the state of Texas who I think was maybe the first state to start implementing this for their English language learners. And they had a huge success. And I know there are several of the studies proving its efficacy are based off of using this specifically for English language learners to improve their bilingual or trilingual or multilingual abilities, with English being the primary focus. The software is only in English. It does technically have a the instructions of how to play and the objectives of each exercise. You can have it told to you in Spanish so that you can actually know what you're doing when you sit down to play them. But right now it's only in English. I wish that it was in other languages, because, you know, I think that English isn't the only language where there are challenges with, our phonological awareness. And now other languages may not break the rules as much as English does. But one of the things is that all languages are borrowing words from other languages. And that's where a lot of hurdles come from. English has just loved to steal words from every other language. And that can add to all of the rules being broken time and time again, you know. So by targeting, at the end of the day, targeting that root language processing can definitely help other language processing. Laura was mentioning earlier about her ability to play the piano better, and reading music is similar to, it's a language. It's just different symbols. And so by strengthening our ability to process that language, I really feel that it's very complementary to furthering, strengthening people's ability to process coding language and all types of language. Because I'm not a neurologist, but I don't think that our brain, that one language is only in one spot and then another language is in a different spot. You know, it's all language in areas of the brain. And so I think that's the first and last question. I answered as best as I can, but you had also asked about artificial intelligence. Now, the software itself, one of the things that adds to it being such a powerful software is that it's adaptive to the individual user. So a user is going to progress at their learning rate and not some predetermined, you got to get this master, you know, you've got 3 weeks to learn fractions, then we're moving on, you know, which I understand that we need those timeframes in an academic setting when you leave the home for school, but within the program, areas of strength that exercises target, they will be completed quite rapidly. And then areas that have the most room for improvement will be worked on more regularly to continue strengthening them, to really make sure that we don't have skills overlap, you know, overcompensating for weaker skills, that we get all of these skills strengthened and on an even playing field. So that's I don't know if I want to call it artificial intelligence within the program, but that it is adaptive and it's monitoring students like every click and how they're interacting with the software. And then with Gemm, what me and my team, what we do, we're kind of like, you know, monitoring on the other end of how students, young and old, are doing. And we're reaching out to people regularly, talking about progress, reviewing strategies. I have the ability to see, you know, like what kinds of areas a student might be making more mistakes in than others, so that we can talk about it. You know, one thing that comes up for somebody who's not a struggling learner, they will just know when you say the fish is swimming, that means one fish is doing it, and they'll know without knowing why they know when you say the fish are swimming, that it's a bunch of fish. They don't need, you know, or they'll know, you know, the fish swims and the fish swim one versus many. They don't necessarily, a lot of people don't necessarily know why they know the difference. They just do. But a struggling learner doesn't know the difference often, and often will need an explanation. So one of the things that I and my team will do with our students, if I start seeing like, hey, we're struggling with your irregular plurals and processing them. So we'll do a Zoom and we'll talk with our students and work with them on the exercises that are working on processing English language grammar conventions. And then we'll talk, I'll even explain, if you hear the word is, it means one is, you know, and then we bring that S down to the verb. So the fish swims and the fish is swimming, you know, and talk about that to kind of just also let them know that those are those subtle differences that we're listening for that change the meaning to a degree of how many, you know, and that's just one example. But yeah, so that's also what we can see on our end is where there are challenges for the student. Did I get everything? Did I cover the three? Okay, perfect.
Okay, with that, if there's any questions, please raise your hands. But I would love to hear maybe closing statements from Anne and from Delhi, please, just to give us an idea of what is next. How do you work? What you do, and how can we contact you?
Well, I think Delhi did a tremendous job explaining why we're so passionate about our program and the results that we obtain, but it really is helping families and their students and their children become accomplished learners, lifelong learners. And there's two parts to that. I mean, the software is incredible. We stand behind it. As I said, we've worked with 5,000 families to this point. But there's another part to that as well. And I liken it to joining a gym. You can join a very well outfitted gym, but if you don't go and you're not dedicated, you're not going to see the results that you would hope. And that's where our team, where our program support and our education team and Delhi's group comes in, because they'll notice at every turn in the program where a student is struggling, and they're involved. As Delhi said, they're on Zoom calls, they're on calls with parents, sometimes they're on calls with teachers. All the support that we can give to help that student advance, because we know our kids face challenges in the classroom every day. We don't want them disappointed yet again. We want to show them that this is a tool that's going to help them get over their struggles and be successful. And that's our goal.
Wonderful. And Delhi, thank you very much for this. And I'm so touched and flattered because I'm so happy. It took me only 10 years ago to learn about it, but I just read it in a book, and I wish I would have learned it 40 years ago, 50 years ago, when I really was learning.
Mm-hmm. I had that same wish. I wish this had existed when my family had gotten my diagnosis, when I was 8 years old. And, and I may have not always been the most willing participant because it's hard, and it's tiring, always working hard, but I know how life-changing it would have been, had this existed back when I was a child, navigating the challenges of just, can I please learn to read, and so I think that's also another reason why it's just so easy to be so passionate about it. So yeah, so thank you so much for having us, Laura. It's just a real pleasure to be able to share this with so many people.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. And on this, we will close this call and hope you can join us for other webinars. We always have at least 4 or 5 per month. And thank you all. And we're closing the